So thank you so much for joining our panel discussion, Podcasting for a More Inclusive World. Where does inclusivity begin? How do we encourage more diversity in the podcasting industry? We will cover how the podcasting industry can reach more people, encourage more diversity, and as podcasters, how we can facilitate meaningful conversations about diversity and inclusion in the current U.S. climate. So I'm Marla Isaacson. I am the moderator for this panel. I'm also the founder of ASA, asacollective.com, an independent podcast network with a reach of 4 million listeners and a two-sided marketplace connecting women-hosted podcasts and women-hosted brands in order to increase the representation and influence of women's voices worldwide. I'm also the host of a podcast called Mind of a Mentor, which is an intimate discussion with influential women about their hero's journey. So that's me, and I would love to introduce my panel of amazing women. Pamela, I will start with Pamela. Pamela is the founder of Vision Made Business Growth and Personal Coaching. She helps women to conquer their what ifs and I can'ts, then by going after their what's next. Oh, I love that. Host of What's Next podcast for women, co-host of Talk to You Us Thursday, and founder of Vision Made magazine. She's a multi-talented businesswoman that has an unbeatable mindset, and her philosophy is, if I can do it, so can you. Pamela, that's kind of my philosophy too, so I love that. Absolutely. I really do. Okay, Anna. Anna Tider is an award-winning international journalist, author, and host of Thank You Mama, in which she interviews women from all around the world about the most important lessons they learn from their mothers. After more than a decade working in international marketing and advertising at large corporations, she published 2 memoirs and well over 100 essays, articles, and interviews in renowned European newspapers, magazines, and journals. Her topics are feminism, motherhood, immigration, and resilience. Again, love that. Danielle Meadow-Stinnett is a mother of 4, wife, and third-generation entrepreneur. She's owner of 11-year-old minority-owned and led digital branding firm, Octane Design Studios, based in the heart of the bluegrass. And she's the host of the More Than Graphics podcast. She's also, I love this, a blended family advocate, being both a mother, foster parent, and adopted parent, a special needs mom, an autism awareness advocate, and a retro gamer that's fused the strategy of gaming through her boy mom parenting style. And finally, Gwendolyn Dosk, is the host and creator of Good is in the Details. Her podcast invites experts from a variety of fields, the ideas underscoring their work. She's a professor in the philosophy department at Cal Poly Pomona. She's the author of Tips from the Professor and scholarly articles on existentialism. Wow. That's amazing.
Thanks.
So what I want to do is I'm just going to go around and have you guys just say a couple of sentences, and then we'll get into the heart of the conversation. So Pamela, I'm going to have you go first. Talk about your podcast, your motivation. Like, why are you doing this podcast? What does it mean to you?
Absolutely. First, thank you for having me on here. This is so exciting to be amongst other podcasters, and we get to gel and come together and gel and mush together and figure how can we make podcasting rock the world over TV. So that's my ultimate goal. So the reason why I did that is one thing, I apologize, is that I started doing this because of the when I still work in corporate. Mm-hmm. And I really had that moment of, this is it. And seriously, I literally was like, Okay. And then I figured out this was it. And I literally had the this is it breakdown. I literally sat in my cubicle and cried. I cried so much. Then I go, okay, maybe it's just me. I'm having this moment. So I went around to a couple ladies in my office and asked them, well, what are you going to do? What is your what's next? And a lot of them just did this. That deer in the headlights thing.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, it wasn't me. I wasn't having my me moment. And so I had started doing some really dig deep on Pam and figured out what my what's next is. And so I started doing that I created the podcast, What's Next for Women. And I bring on women such as yourselves and other women out here who are conquering their what is, but still going after their what's next, no matter what. So
Love
that was
it.
And that's why I created the podcast. And that's why I'm on this journey. I want us all to do whatever we want to do, but do it our way, not no one else's way.
Thanks, Pamela. Anna, a couple of sentences about your podcast.
I had an amazing mom. I had a mom who had 2 successful careers, parallel careers. She was a movie star, boarded visual artist. And on top of that, she was an incredible human being. And I'm an only child, and we were best friends and sisters, and we had this amazing relationship. And then I lost her to cancer 4 years ago in a very shocking, fast way. 6 weeks after the diagnosis,
wow.
She was gone. And I suddenly had this panic attack at one point that I was going to forget everything she taught me. And I started writing down everything. First, down everything she told me, and then I started writing down everything she showed me. And this started becoming a book of my mother's lessons. But then the book developed into her biography, because I thought her lessons don't really need her life story behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was telling my friends about this project I was working on, and I was surprised with how women reacted, how they love this idea of thinking about what they've learned from their mothers, and how this is something so important and so obvious, but we never really do. We never articulate it. We never really put it in words. Right. And this, for reasons we will talk later about when we talk about diversity, immediately became, I want to talk to women all around the world about this and hear what they've learned from their mothers. And this is how this idea for the podcast was born. It happened very, very organically. And from the first moment on, I was madly in love with this project. But I have to say, with every single woman, now I've had 70 interviews, with every single woman, I'm more and more in love with it. I really, with every guest, I feel like I've received a present. With every guest who comes in and talks about her mom, even if the relationship wasn't so good, you can learn something from that.
Absolutely.
And I hope and I think my listeners feel the same way. I really feel like every episode is a big present directly from my heart, and a way to connect to women all around the world.
Thank you, Anna. This is chills. I get chills when I hear you talking about your podcast.
Thank you.
Anyway, Danielle, let's talk about your podcast.
Sure. The More Than Graphics podcast is literally a virtual safe space for women in tech and women creatives. So it really was birthed out of my business hashtag, which is More Than Graphics. So I got a compliment a while back that, Danielle, you're just so much more than graphics. You do so much of everything else. And as that became more of a business mantra, it also became more of a lifestyle mantra for myself to actually be more than graphics. I'm more than my work. I am more than a robot. I'm more than a machine. I'm more than the 9-to-5 or the badge that I wear. So this became more of a holistic tribe for finding other women in kind of similar paths, both being, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, there's a safe place for you here to share and chronicleize our stories and honor our life journeys in whatever place that may be. So many of us represent women in tech, but there's plenty of other women creatives, including myself, and a range of mothers as well. So that's something that we celebrate here quite a bit. And that was really the heart of the More Than Graphics podcast, is being more and doing the work on self that we all have to strive to do to be better than the day before.
Danielle, thank you. And Gwendolyn, let's hear about your podcast.
Hi. Well, thanks for having me. And I just want to say that it's very cool to be on this panel. It's very exciting. I've really enjoyed hearing how all of your shows got started. It's just so inspiring. And my show started out, I'm a philosophy professor, and I've noticed that in my classes, no matter the subject, that I tend to go back to this question of what does it mean to live life well? And I think that that's something that is missing from a lot of conversations in education. We teach people, maybe computer science, some history, biology, but how do we talk about enjoying your life? And so my friend and I, we invite experts on who have many different backgrounds. And it's not that we're promoting a business. We're really asking, what are the underscoring ideas behind your work? So for example, we asked a plastic surgeon who works specifically on the face, what is beauty? We asked an FBI agent, what is justice? And what I've found is that people really do enjoy these conversations. And I was having them in the university classroom, and I just wanted to bring it out to a general audience. I just suspected that people might be engaged. And so it's been a really exciting thing to see grow.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate that these are I'm blessed to be on this panel with you. Your podcasts are amazing. And for those people listening, please check them out because I think they're fabulous. Okay, let's get to the heart of the conversation. So let's start very basic. What does diversity and inclusion mean to you? And I'm going to start with Danielle. What do you think? What does it mean to you?
That is it's almost like I want to say a loaded question, but also a more simplistic question. I consider diversity inclusion an active listening conversation. And it's definitely something that I have personally gone through recently for myself and my profession and my career. How can I be more inclusive for myself, let alone be inclusive in a lot of circles that I'm not necessarily always invited into initially. So I consider that as an open invitation to start a dialogue. I consider that as an open invitation to say things that maybe it's either not necessarily out of character, but more timely in the essence of whatever it is the topic is on. But I really try to make an effort to define diversity and inclusion as, again, an open conversation, an active listening conversation where we're both able to hear each other. We may not always agree, but we're always listening. We're actively taking in and inputting what each other is saying.
Yeah, I love that. Pamela, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you?
And I'm with Danielle. I'm so glad that we're talking about this because I used to work on the HR side. So I really had
you know this stuff.
back and forth. But
right.
Now, more so now than ever that, the world is evolving and we as society are revolving. And so in some sense, to bring it all together, I like where Danielle said, we come with an open mind, we sit down and we talk. And no matter what the end result is, we come with an open mind with no judgment. Back in the day, I remember the judgment coming to the table and I'm like, okay, no, let's gather up and let's go get training on how to handle the inclusion and diversity. But now we are coming with an open mind and we're talking about it more. And I'm glad it is being talked about more because back then it never did talk about it. So to me, the openness, the flexibility of you knowing that the person across from you may not be where you're at, but at least we can come to the table as open as we can about anything and everything. And also too, it allows you to be observant mentally and physically of all that is going on around in the world. So I'm glad that we're talking about it too, because it comes with it's a heavy topic to talk about, and I'm glad we get to talk about it. But it does allow the openness that we need to start doing and talk about it at the table.
So we're going to continue to go around to ask each panel, but to me, there's a sense of trust and respect.
Yes.
And that has to be part of diversity. And you have to step into it and say, yep, I trust and respect. So to me, that's really critical.
Open-mindedness.
No, sure.
You have to approach this in the most open-mindedness as possible. Even though, what we've gone through and what we've been through, the open-mindedness is another piece of that to talk about and to approach it as well.
Gwendolyn, what do you think? What does diversity and inclusion mean to you?
I think so. I'm taking notes as you're speaking.
I love this.
I am also really excited that we're having this conversation. I think, Pamela, what you said as far as being observant was that I know just in academia that when I was a student, there were not women philosophers that were taught. I never took a class where there was a woman philosopher, that I even asked when I was working on my master's if there was such a thing as a woman philosopher. And being aware of that, now that I'm on the other side, now that I'm the one who's creating the syllabus and now, creating a podcast, that I want to make sure that it turns out there are female philosophers, but I just want to make sure that there are voices out there so that my students of a variety of backgrounds can grab onto that and be like, okay, I get this point of view. Mm-hmm. And I think in the last century, what you have with film, with literature, with music, is that because of the availability of it, because of radio and all of these things, that we are learning that there is more than one way to see the world. That's what we're learning through all these different mediums. And now podcasting can be part of that story. And I think that two things that are important as far as inclusion and diversity is that I think there are two qualities that a podcaster should have: curiosity and also being humble. And I think that those two things imply the other, because when you're curious, you're recognizing that there are things that you don't know. Mm-hmm. And you have to have that that humility in order to be a listener and invite that conversation. And podcasting, like I said, in the same realm as the last century with film, literature, and music, that has opened up so many audiences to different ways of viewing the world and celebrating being in the world. This is a great way to be part of that. So I would say for anyone who's podcasting, to approach it with an intentionality.
Anna, let's go to you. How does diversity and inclusion, what does it mean to you?
This is an extremely interesting question for me, because I was born in Yugoslavia, which is now part of it is Croatia. And we are a very homogeneous part of the world. But I was also born to my mom, and pardon me that I'm talking about my mom again, but this is a Mother's Day summit. I was born to my mom, who in the early 70s started being involved with helping children in Sudan. There was a big crisis in Sudan, and she was collecting money, and she would donate all the awards. She was winning awards as an actress, donating all her awards and collecting money and writing about it and talking about it. And she would personally fly to Sudan with every shipment of food and medication and money to help children there. And she raised me, I watched her, and she raised me with this. And she raised me with, every time I would talk about something, women this and that, she would be the first to say, yeah, Anna, this is women in our part of the world. Don't forget there are women in India, or women in Africa, or women, even here, there are women who work in factories from 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. She was always trying to open the world and always direct me into the other dimension of the same story. And to me, this is inclusivity, and this is diversity. She raised me to always think of the others and the other ways and other cultures, their lives. And I remember when I wrote this big article, I was so proud about it. I interviewed it was about like luxury coffee brands. And I interviewed all these fancy baristas and these expensive coffee brands. And she read it and she said, this is a great interview, but what about coffee farmers who live on $1 a day? And I was like, and I went and rewrote it. And this was, for me, this was specifically the moment when I understood connected we are and how we can't drink expensive coffee without somebody farming that coffee over there.
Right.
And this is how I approach my podcast and every time I write about something. And for me, this is diversity, feeling that we are interconnected and we are one, and there are people who live differently and in different circumstances and maybe look different, but we are still interconnected and interdependent.
So my next question, and you touched on it, has to do with we're all podcasters. So if you can talk about how each of you use your podcast to highlight diversity and inclusion. How do you do that? What strategies do you use? How do you make that happen? So Anna, I'm going to continue on with you.
As I said, the moment this idea for Thank You Mama was born, it didn't even occur to me that it could be a story of a white woman in, I don't know, United States or in Europe, because that, I'm sorry to say it, but that has no value. It only makes sense. This podcast and this message only has sense, and we can only learn and inspire and push each other, and it only has value if we all talk together, if we all exchange this information. So from the moment Thank You Mama was born, I knew I want to talk to women from all around the world, and I created this, and then I found myself in the situation where, of course, mostly surrounded with women that are to me, and it took a little learning how to reach out, and it was a beautiful lesson to see how easy it is. And this is why I love podcasting, because it's so easy to reach out and it's so easy to have this conversation. Most of the people everywhere in the world are able to on this computer or the other and talk to you about this and record their audio. And from the beginning, I really wanted, and I think when you look at my episodes and look at these women's faces, and I sometimes scroll down my Instagram just to look at it because I love all of these women so much. Mm-hmm. And they come from Nepal to Trinidad to Tanzania to everywhere. And it took an effort, but was once it starts rolling, you see how easier it is, how easy it is to reach out, and how, again, interconnected we are.
Thank you.
I hope that answered.
Perfect. So Danielle, let's talk about your podcast. How do you use your podcast to focus on and highlight diversity and inclusion?
Well, it's ran by some pretty badass Black women, if you want to say so really out loud. So I'd like to think that's a good start, but we kind of tease it out that, we're Black on Black on Black plus girl parts. Like, that's really kind of how we coin it. We are absolutely advocates of women who are brain thinkers, who are think tanks, right? Mm-hmm. We're creatives. We are women in tech. So there's a lot of things that are going on in our brains that sometimes are not connected to our hands, and sometimes it's vice versa, right? So we like to celebrate and insinuate that type of diversity. Being a creative kind of comes with its own exclusive shell, if you will. We're kind of those introverts that stay at home and, game in the dark until 3 a.m. But really, we're just like average people, like anybody else, with kids and families, with deadlines and careers. And I think it's really important that when we talk about, diversity, how do you really kind of put that into an umbrella and still dance? So it's one of those situations where I like to reach out in terms of diversity on our show, in terms of topics, in terms of types of people on our show. We love having women on the show, of course, but we also have to balance that out, obviously, with a few male appearances, which I also think is really important to have on our show. If we are all for women, we have to sort of also in kind and scientifically balancing that equation, right? We have to also kind of be for the guys. And so I feel like it's really important that, we showcase that. We can't always be rah. Well, yes, we can be all rah women, but it's really important that we also balance that rawness with the reality that in a lot of ways, this is a man's world, but it wouldn't be nothing without a woman or a girl.
So you touched on something. I have a related question. So we're talking about diversity and inclusion. We're all women. How do you think your podcast is really helping in terms of women's empowerment? Can you just talk about that for a bit?
Absolutely. So women's empowerment is such a fun topic to talk about, period, because we have so many women that celebrate empowerment in their own way. Maybe it's for women in tech, it's baking the cake. That's a whole nother experiment because I can work with engineering. I can work with all the laser beams. But when it comes to putting confection sugar in the oven, it's a no, right? So there's this area where we feel like we're empowering women to really step out and step in to some places that they've not done before. And we feel like that's both a level of magic, rocket science, and a lot of creative gusto.
Love it. Gwendolyn, can you talk about your podcast in terms of diversity and inclusion? And I'm throwing in this empowerment question because I just see such a correlation.
I know. Now I'm thinking about some of the guests that we've had where that's been a thing. I think for me, like I said, back with my academic background, that for a very long time, authority figures pretty much looked one way. And I think just by virtue of inviting experts on who look different, have different backgrounds, female, male, that in and of itself, to have somebody and say, this is the expert, that sometimes you don't even have to say, you don't have to highlight the ethnicity or anything like that, but just by virtue of the fact of doing that. And so I think that it has been very intentional on my part to find experts from different ethnic backgrounds. I'm from Southern California. It's actually really not a stretch to do that, but it's a shame that would be difficult in other areas or somebody wouldn't pay attention to it. But I think that is really important. And as far as the female empowerment, one episode that we did was with a former OBGYN nurse who turned sex educator. And what really hit me was that when we were having this discussion about sex ed, we did not do anything. We didn't say anything naughty, nothing bad, but I had to mark it explicit. Why? Because we use the actual biological terms for a woman's body. So you have to mark it explicit. But that in and of itself was part of female empowerment, because when it comes to, that was a discussion that we were having and, about the way sex ed is taught, that you still have women in their, middle age that don't understand how their parts work, because it is taught in such a way that the woman is passive, almost as though it's not for her. And part of her biology is just left out of the equation. Right. And so just by having that conversation, which might not seem like, we're talking about sex ed, that sounds sexy, naughty or whatnot, but it actually really did have to do with women having permission to understand and touch their own bodies. And so that's the kind of thing that I just go ahead and, I don't know, it's fun to have these conversations. It's fun to put it out there and to just go ahead and say, this is something that's marked explicit, but you know what? I don't think it's explicit. I think it's normal. And maybe normalizing having people of different voices, normalizing talking about women's bodies is in and of itself the empowerment and the inclusion and the diversity.
Yeah, I think it's an intentionality that everyone's talking about, and using the platform to tell stories about diversity, about inclusion, about feeling empowered or not feeling empowered. This is why I love the platform of podcasting. I think it's incredible. What a wonderful platform that we can all tell these stories. So Pamela, I wanted to ask you, so how do you use your podcast to highlight diversity and inclusion?
It took me a minute to get out of my bubble. I promise you, I went in thinking, okay, I'm just going to talk to these women that I worked with and we're all going to rule the world. And then it hit me when I had a follower in Indonesia ask me a question. That was the day, and we still talk to this day, was my eye opener that there's women around the world that I have the power in some sense to impact them, to know that they can go after their whatever they want to do. So I promise you, and it took me probably about 4 or 5 months to really understand that I needed to get out, and I started to get out of my bubble and start relating with other women outside of the bubble. And so what I started doing is I actually started talking to other women, just asking. I did the big ask, and started developing relationships and starting connecting to other women outside of the norm of my norm, which I thought everybody would be okay with, which now it's totally, it was an eye opener, but I love that it was an eye opener and it was a shocker to me. So that was one, a diversity that I have incorporated into my podcast. And I'm like you, Danielle. Yes, we are women that are ruling and rocking the world. I all believe in woman power. I got the woman power, but you're right. We live in a man's world. And it took me, I've been in podcasting now almost 3 years. I just had my first man on my show, and it was the most eye-opening conversation we had. We actually talked over almost an hour and a half.
Wow.
And it was just about woman empowerment and how we as women can work with men and having men understand how we feel. And that was just such an amazing conversation to have. And the other conversation, and because I could talk about this a lot, was I brought a millennium on. Now I'm over 50, and understanding to bring on a millennium that we actually connected her and I, and we still connecting. And she talked about, and her business is all about, she sells marijuana. And to bring that into my podcast, thinking, okay, I'm going to be judged, I'm going to hear all the ridicule. I didn't care. And the bully, and having her, and then having the guy on the other side, like, we got you, was really eye opening. And so knowing that I have that type of influence and power with people behind me, where my podcast allows me to do that and show women such as myself and more, but they can go after whatever, is just amazing. So that's how I use mine.
Awesome. So let's talk about the podcast industry. We have a long way to go. I think the numbers are better. For those people who are research geeks like I am, I love the annual Edison research studies that they do. And in terms of people who podcast, I think we're starting to see an increase of Black podcasters, Asian podcasters, Black listeners, Asian listeners, etc. But it's still a long way to go. Same thing with hosts. 27% of podcast hosts are women. So, to me, we definitely have. So I guess my question is, how can the industry itself reach more people and encourage more diversity in the industry, with podcasts? So, Gwendolyn, I'm going to start with you. Did you hear me?
Okay,
Gwendolyn, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was unmuting myself. I think it's a great question, and I think that one of the ways to encourage more diversity is to practice it. So, for example, when I say, like, with my syllabus, I make sure that I have a variety of different thinkers that I introduce to my students.
Mm-hmm.
And I use the same thing with podcasting. And I think one of the temptations, because even just by the numbers, what you've said, I think that one of the temptations as a podcaster is that you want to have more followers, you want to have more likes, you want to have more downloads. So you might overlook a guest who could be real quality, but is not as well known. Forget about it. Let it go. So what if the person is knowledgeable and interesting? Have them on the show. Don't worry if they don't have a big social media account or big following, because if we stick to that algorithm, if you will, then the numbers will stay the same. So if you're going to shift the numbers, give somebody who is of quality that voice. And then what will happen is somebody else will listen to the episode and maybe buy their book or say, hey, I want to have them on my podcast. So I think that the first step is that to encourage diversity is to go ahead and practice it and let go of the idea of downloads and likes by their social media profile. Just have someone on who's good, interesting, and you've got it.
Thank you. Anna, what do you think about how the podcast industry can reach more people and encourage more diversity in the industry?
I don't want to put it to the industry. I want to put it to us because I don't know who the podcast industry is and why they should be responsible for this. But I think we are.
Good point.
And I've encouraged so many women from different countries to start a podcast. And I'm very, very proud to say one of the ladies is a civil rights lawyer from Tanzania who was my guest. And she was so inspired that she's like, I want to start my podcast. And I'm like, bring it on. I'll into whatever network I'm in. I'm going to help you. I think it's on us to inspire and support other diverse people to dare, and to what we've learned and we've known for many years is that women are very shy to have a voice, and I think it's really on us, especially as women podcasters, to encourage women to dare to have a voice and to show them they do have a story to tell, and to inspire them and support them whenever we can. And even proactively be like, this, you have a story, please. I think that's what would help.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't podcast, potentially it could be perceived as a little scary, but I mean, the minute that you start podcasting, we all fall in love with it. And it's such an amazing platform to tell our stories. So, Danielle, let's talk about your thoughts in terms of how the industry can reach more people and encourage diversity. And I like your point, Anna, but, Danielle, if you want to add on that, or if you have any other thoughts.
Absolutely. I think both are extremely awesome and valid points. I think it's really important that we continue to showcase that representation matters. We're using, I'll use your example, mama taught us everything, right? Our moms are those pinnacle leaders. We know a lot of things about life because our moms showed us those experiences. We have to be that leader within our own realm of industry so that more people can come up and learn and level up in a way that allows them to flourish in their own areas. So I think it's really important that we be that example, but we also have to understand that impact is greater than perfection. And that is always a cultural aspect to us as women, not necessarily in a particular location, but as women, that has always been a very pinnacle part in our lives where we feel like we have to be some sort of perfect. And we really don't. It really is a matter of overlooking all of that and just starting and doing it anyway.
Yeah, I love that. I so agree with you. I'm just thinking my life and the jobs I've had, this drive for perfection versus just, let's just get it done. Get it done. I can't see that yellow note. Do
messy.
This is my little post-it that's always here. And it's like, do it messy. It doesn't matter.
That.
And I think I want to connect to Danielle and say, yes, we have not to be perfectionists.
So great. So great.
Not to be.
I'm going to borrow that. Do it messy. I like that. I'm going to borrow that.
I'm going to have to use that on my motivational Monday. I love that.
So Pamela, your thoughts?
All of these are great points. I love all of you with your ladies. I'm glad I'm last, so I can yeah, you guys are all, that was good. We're done. But no, I feel as I said, all are very valid points, but also too, I think we need to talk about podcasting more, especially I'm going to go ahead and talk about women of color. There's so many women that I actually in my group, I too, Anna, have had, I'm partnered up with another young lady who wanted to do podcasting, but didn't understand what podcasting was a little scared. And so then when she sat with me actually for 6 months to see how it worked. She got to see it, feel it, touch it. The whole thing totally changed. So like you said, Anna, do it. Messy was all about, you'll figure it out on the way, but we need to start talking about it more. As we talk about TV, as we talk about radio, we as women need to come hand in hand together and talk about podcasting, what we love about it, what we don't like about it, but still talk about podcasting. I know podcasting is new, but we can make that stamp. Us here can make that stamp where podcasting can become that medium in society where people are like, okay, yeah, podcasting is more important, more better than TV and radio than anything else. So I feel we need to talk about it more and talk about each other and charge each other with it, as well as support each other. That's another piece of it too. We need to, stop worrying about everybody else and support each other and leave the TV and radio alone.
Right. So that is leading me into my next question, which is, this was many levels a really tough year, right? It just was. Especially, the issues around inclusion and diversity, it just was so exacerbated by what was going on in the world. So this is sometimes a really challenging conversation for people to have. So can you talk, if you from your vantage point and based on what was going on this year, did you have any challenging conversations, difficult conversations about these topics? And if you could talk about that, Danielle, I'll throw it to you.
Absolutely. So I mentioned before that we've had men on our podcast before. It was kind of one of a Jay and Bay reference, if you will. We had the wife on first, who is an amazing entrepreneur in her own right. And then we followed up with several episodes later with her husband, who is also an entrepreneur and in the creative industry as a storytelling coach. And so in interviewing both of these women, or both of these people, both of them being very white, it was really kind of cool for them to be very transparent in not knowing enough and being very open and honest about their feelings in trying to connect. I think that was so very transparent, but also very raw, because people at that time, in the very beginnings of this particular era of social unrest for justice and inequality, it was very interesting to see how many doors were starting to kind of pivot inward and not keep their doors open outward. And so it was really interesting through this particular episode that he just was flat out like, hey, I'm a white man, 41 years old. I am learning. I am still learning. I want to be a window or an advocate for other people to understand that when things are different and very opposing to where I am still advocating and trying and striving anyway. And I think having those type of open and transparent conversations is what's necessary to do the next level, to level up and do the next thing.
Thank you. Anna, difficult conversations about diversity and inclusion this year.
It's strange because I really spoke to at this stage, and I never had a conversation really. I was thinking about this, and what am I going to answer? I did have one, which was
Anna, hold on. We lost your video. Sorry.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Just check.
I'm going to turn my video on and off.
Okay.
Am I back?
Well, no, but keep on talking.
Okay. It must be my... Maybe it will come back.
Okay.
I can move.
No.
If it doesn't come back.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I had a lady, a guest, who Asian. She has a podcast about self Asian women, and we started talking. And I very clumsily asked her the question about, the stereotyping Asian women, which is connected to their own culture partially, and women shy and not self-confident and so on. And asked it, and she answered it I wasn't happy with how it went. And we finished the interview, and it just wouldn't sit with me. It's not good work. I don't want. This is not good. And I emailed her and I said, look, I don't feel good about this. We didn't talk about what I really wanted to talk about with you. Put a question the wrong way or something. And she was like, of course. And we re-recorded and had this conversation, and it was great. So I think it's important that we learn. I think it's important that we open heart and just admit our clumsiness and be like, it wasn't good. Let's start it again. To you, me, and us, and this conversation. So that's my moment in my podcast.
As a podcaster, I had some difficult conversations this past summer with women, and I'm a white woman, and I came about it the way that you're all talking about, which is, look, I genuinely really care about this. I admit I don't have enough information. I want to be respectful. Do you have any thoughts? Now, I wasn't saying you're the Black person, you have to teach me everything. That was not the point. The point was, I want to have an open conversation with you. I want to do better. So that was really an interesting discussion. And as difficult as this year was, I do think that we're starting to see more of these conversations happening, and I hope they continue. So Gwendolyn, I'm gonna pass it to you. Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah. So I'm, as I'm listening and I'm thinking, I can't think of any difficult conversations. It was definitely made it part of the podcast. And I think that that's where the humility comes in, that's important. And I actually enjoy these kinds of conversations about, what is justice and all of that stuff. I also, just in terms of like the messiness or whatnot, I was thinking, we saw this when we had our meeting, before that. I've got my daughter in the picture. And so, I remember like when I first started thinking, oh God, she made a noise. Oh God, it's going to be in the podcast. Oh no. And I just start thinking, nope, you know what? It's imperfect, but it's actually kind of cool, because maybe when she grows up, this is going to be part of her life. She's going to be able to say, you can hear me in the background of a podcast. And I'm white, but she is biracial, and she's going to be in a different world, right? The world is going to look at her differently. She's probably going to get a lot of, what are you? So part of having these conversations is, in terms of the theme of Mother's Day, it's to be part of a world that is going to be good for her, to actively contribute to that. And I think, I also recently did an episode, I'm editing it right now, with my friend from undergrad who is a Asian American history professor. And I normally have a general outline before we do episodes, but with him, I realized, I said, I'm at a deficit here. I am your student. Tell me what is going on. I wanted to understand the context of today. And the reason that I reached out to him in the first place was because a former student of mine who I have on Instagram, she's of Chinese descent. She's American. She's of Chinese descent. And she posted a story during the height of all of the crimes,
right.
Tearing up, just terrified about going outside, or terrified for her family. And it was paying attention to that then made me reach out to my friends. So this is actually back to Pamela's point, the idea of being an observer, just what is on people's minds, what would cause an impact. And I'd let my former student know that, thank you for posting that. And she was amazed. She was afraid that she was being dramatic and crying or whatnot. I said, no. I'm glad you did that, so that then I have created something that is for more people. You are the reason I did that. So I think that is part of, having the conversations, admitting when you don't know something and being willing to listen.
Right.
And offering that for other people as a guide, just again, what was it? Encouraging more diversity by practicing it yourself.
Love it. Pamela, talk to me about do you have any really tough conversations this year? Because, again, diversity and inclusion was the forefront of a lot of conversation. Can you talk about how you approached it and if you had any challenging conversations along the way?
Actually, I'm going through one right now. I actually have, there is she's actually my client, but she's also is writing a piece for my magazine. So we're going to really pray on this. But she's really talking about and it's not bad, but she's talking about the sadly enough, the death of the young lady that just, and that passed. And we talked through on the impact of the young lady's death, and talked about, she was starting out with fault. And I had to tell her there's no fault here. We have to learn from what has happened. And it's not fault, it's less of education and awareness of what happened is what led to the circumstance of it, sadly enough. And so I'm glad we are talking about it, because women, as we are going into Mother's Day, and sadly we lost a life because of this, but we as women and we as society need to start facing what's going on in the world. It's not like what it was not what it was in the past. Things are going on. Our children are faced with so many different circumstances that we can't let it go. We can't let it go by. We have to talk about it, and we have to and may it hurt, rather for us to deal with the hurt than a life being lost. And so her and I really have been talking about it. I've had to have her redo the piece a couple of times, because it was really, and I had to have her make her understand you also have to be aware of other people's feelings and surroundings and circumstances. So it's really been tough, but I'm glad we're talking about it, because it made me as a grandma and as a mother, make my daughter understand that even when she was growing up, is totally different. And that we have to be open, and we have to talk to my grandchildren who too are biracial, to understand that the world is so different. And here's how we're going to approach it. And it's not to make them be scared, but make them aware, and make her aware of what it's not like what it was before.
Right.
Be aware of things go on, and people are where they are, and just be, as my friends always tell me, pay attention, open your eyes, because sometimes I just be like, no. But this has made me made me open up my eyes and be attention and be aware of what's going on around me. And so I'm glad we talk about it, though, and it's needed to be talked about.
Thank you.
Can I echo on that, Marla, just a little bit?
Yeah, go.
My family was recently interviewed by NPR right around George Floyd. And it was really interesting. My children range from ages 14 to 9 months. So we have a little bit of range of kids there, and they're all ethnically different. We have everything from Caucasian to a Black child to biracial children. And so it's very interesting. How do we talk about, privilege, and how do we talk about racial injustice? How do we talk about good cops and bad cops? And how do we talk about, all the social and civil and racial unrest lately in this particular phase of this Black Lives Matter movement and so on? So, and echoing that, Pamela, I really, really, really opening and being aware, but that comes, I feel like, with a double-edged sword, a catch-22 in some areas. And I think that's the lesson that I'm trying to pass on as a mom to our children, especially different aspects across the board. You know, my wonderful white son will tell me, Mom, sometimes I just hate being white. And I understand that. I understand his frustration. And at the same time, I have, you know, a very young, beautiful black boy who tells me, Mom, I'm scared. I'm scared to go outside to play sometimes. And, you know, how do you, and it's all in one household, guys. This is not like some TV program going on in one room and a radio broadcast going on in the other. This is happening at the kitchen table. So these are conversations that I really feel like are important as we talk about being aware. What does that awareness look like? And on what level are we allowing our children to both embody awareness and then produce and actually showcase awareness in some way, act out of awareness.
Right.
That's really important. So I just wanted to add that little tidbit.
No, I appreciate that. And I think this is where the power of podcasting comes in, that, you know, because we're connecting on a very intimate level, and we can get pretty real. So again, another reason why I just love the platform. So we're about almost done. I don't see any questions. So what I thought I would do is go around just quickly how people can contact you and anything else you want to talk about quickly about a project that you may be working on. So Anna, I'm going to go to you first. How do people reach you and anything percolating? And we guys have only a couple, like we don't have that much time, so you have to talk fast, okay?
You can, and most of social media. Also, Untitled is my website. If you can't remember that, then thankyumama.net. I'd love to connect. My next project is, I'm hoping to turn Thank You Mama into a book, and I think it's going to be.
Ooh, love that. Awesome. Gwen, thank you, Anna. Gwendolyn.
So Good is in the Details Pod on Instagram, and Good is in the Details Pod at gmail.com. Okay. Yeah. No, I was just reading some of the chat, but yeah, we love to connect. And it's always good to hear new podcasts and different voices. So yeah, on Instagram, Good is in the Details Pod.
Awesome. Danielle, contact and anything new coming up.
We're doing the same old. We're sharing stories. We're celebrating women. We're celebrating women in tech. You can find all things at Octane Design. That's across Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, on LinkedIn, all the places.
Love it. And Pamela?
You can find What's Next podcast on all the major platforms, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And you can also check us out on the website at www.pamelamstone.com.
Great. And I'd love everybody to check out ASA Collective. Our network is free for women in podcasting, asacollective.com. And very quickly, we've got a free program coming up called ASA Academy, which is a 7-week accelerator program. So you can take up your podcast and rev it up and just do great things with it. So please check us out, asacollective.com. My podcast is Mind of a Mentor. And I see we have a guest.
Hello. Hi, everyone. This is Bhardwaj. I just got finished with my other session, and I wanted to come and say hello and thank you all for being with us today.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks so much for including us. This is a really important conversation.
100%. 100%.
I think we could have gone hours with it.
You were the absolute right person to lead it, Marla. I've been waiting to meet you for quite some time, but we've been building, this platform, as you know.
Awesome.
It's taken a labor of love, and now we've got the right team behind us. I hope you all had a great session, a great conference so far. And yes. This is so important. Like, your voices, they matter so much to all of us in the team. Like, they're asleep right now in Thailand and France, and
oh gosh,
they are, but they're working around the clock to keep it going. We're gonna have another summit next month, June 22nd to the 24th. We're gonna announce it. We had 250 speakers at our March 8th event for International Women's Day. 300 at this one, so we're inviting everybody back.
Hey.
Yeah. The next summit is called Stronger Together, and we're inviting men to join us in this conversation. So we're going to blow this up. I'm going to count on all of you and your shows and your content. And we're going to talk a little bit about it at the reception that we're going to have in about 40 minutes, the State of Women Podcast Network reception. And then on Friday, I'm going to invite all of you to a lunch and learn that we're hosting with the Podcast Academy. And it's basically, how do we all stay engaged? Because the conversation you started here is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's our goal. Is like, how do we support all of you? And how do you get it out to the communities? Because now that we've learned Hopin, it's a new technology.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Right.
No, but the thing is, once we've learned, we're going to teach others. And once they learn, this thing has power. And all of the conversations that we've started are going to be archived in a digital library. And then we're going to share them free of charge on our mobile apps that we've now created on $20 mobile phones that are reaching the 1 million.
Yes.
So whoever doesn't have Zoom or Hopin, doesn't matter. We've got your voice, and it's going to go to the girls and the women in parts of the world that you never imagined. So just keep doing
nice.
That's fabulous.
So,
Thank you for this was such an honor and a real privilege. I so appreciate having the opportunity to be on this platform and to talk to these like really kick-ass women.
They're awesome. They're awesome. All of you are awesome, and thank you for sticking with the trainings. And I know it wasn't easy. Like, we sent you a lot of emails, and for each of you to like go through it, and it's like I should give you like a medal or something for crossing them.
No, but I was very prepared, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, and hope to connect after the summit, and then hopefully for the next summit. So thank you. Ladies.
Okay.
Have
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, I don't know how to turn this off now. Okay, everybody. So we're supposed to leave, but I don't know how to just
You
leave.
should have a leave button on so everyone just leaves, and then it will close out on its own.
So
Bye, ladies.
Okay.
Great to
Bye, ladies.
Okay.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you.
yeah.
bye. All right, everybody go, and then I'll go. And
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.